is having hip replacement surgery Tuesday. She postponed it so she can be here today. And so she's going to be sitting, and I hope you can see her all right, because we're so thrilled that she has done all this research. Some new secrets have been revealed that I think people didn't know about. I also asked Edith if either at the beginning or towards the end of her talk, she would tell us a little about how she happened to get from Berlin to Hall County, Nebraska. We're so grateful that she has done so much research, so much for history here, and we do appreciate. There are 3 or 4 people coming in, so we'll let them get in the door. And you have a mic there, Edith?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I don't know if it works.
It'll be on by the time we're
Yeah,
ready.
okay.
Give them a chance to find some seats.
Oh my gosh,
Set up a few more chairs if we need to.
if you have them.
While we're doing that, let me just tell you that we want you to look at our floor. Don't slip on it. But we were able to get 2 grants last fall from the Peter Kiewit Foundation and Fred and Amanda Glade Foundation, and we're able to really clean this floor and put a good surface on it. It had been fine 12 years ago when we opened the building, but it was not a real durable one, and was very difficult to keep clean, and was one of the things that started us on seeing that we needed to upgrade some things around here. The ceiling fans are going and are sending the heat down on you, and we need to thank particularly Don Wiedemeyer that worked with the electrical company to get those working again. One of our problems was we had allowed balloons to be used for parties, and then they go up, and that was the end of fans for a while. Don also painted all of the woodwork outside this summer, and we've hung new pictures, not new ones, very old pictures that were given as a gift. So we're constantly now working on sprucing up the building. We decided it needed to be going back to the original name of the Burlington Station, partly because we say Plum Street Station, and people would call and say, where in the world is that? And I'd say, well, if you go to the railroad tracks, you're there, because it was a depot. And even in that article in the paper, it was called Plum Creek Station, which is in Lexington and not Grand Island. So we have a new name and a new sign. And we also have, when you stop for coffee, we appreciate a little help reimburse for cups and napkins, but we also have a few things on the back table, including a jar if you want to donate something to our capital campaign, because we still have a debt to pay off when we originally took over the depot, and so our goal is to try to have that paid off within this year and have everything really looking attractive here, so that we can be very proud that we have such a nice facility. I'm talking because people keep coming in. But I think now it's time to introduce Edith Robbins, who is a great historian for our county and has some interesting research to tell us about the prisoners of war that were in Hall County. Edith, it's all yours.
Thank you. Okay, I have this one here too. Is that the same here?
No, that's the camera.
Oh, that's the camera.
Yeah, this
okay,
is the
okay.
system here.
So then it works. I hope it works. I hope everybody can hear me. Maybe we should wait until the rest of them sit down. I'm absolutely floored how many people have come in this weather. I'm absolutely floored. I can't believe it. She asked me to say a little thing about myself, how I came here. Well, I decided I want to go to America for a year or two. In 1967, that was the thing to do in Germany. And I thought if I go and learn English, and then I will go back to Germany and will get a better job. That was my idea. Well, I got married. I got stuck. And the man I married, he worked on his PhD in Illinois, where I had my job, and he came from Grand Island. He was not born here, but his family, and they lived here in Grand Island for many years. He went to school here. So that's how I came here. And when we moved back, we lived in Switzerland for a while. When we moved back, we came to Grand Island, and it was, my husband took over the farms from my father-in-law. And at that time, I needed a place to figure out where I'm going to live for the rest of my life. And one of the things you can do with that, do you hear me all well? I don't know. What you can do is put down your roots and figure out how people lived here before. And I was very lucky, because the majority who came here first were Germans. So there are a lot of documents here in this county. There are a lot of information how early immigrants came to this county. And so it is kind of my experience too, because they had the same problems. They had to learn English, they had to get acclimatized to the area here, and they had to figure out how to live here. And that's my story, I guess. I love history, and I certainly have been lucky to have that advantage of speaking both languages, so I can look at documents on both sides, which is a good thing. And that's how I also wound up with the prisoner of war problem, or the prisoner of war here in this county, because there are some documents in German, and I can then put two and two together. The first picture I show you, you might not know why. I have been asked why so many prisoners came to America, and what did they do? Why did they come over here? Well, this is a picture on the Rhine River in Germany, and it is in April 45. The war is not quite over yet. May 8th when the war was over, but this is April. And a lot of German soldiers ran. They didn't walk, they ran to the western part, because they knew if they would be taken by the Russians, the life as in a prison camp would be far different from if they go to the west. And so you have here on the Rhine River by Remagen, you had millions, not just a few thousands, but millions of German prisoners. And a treaty with, or an agreement, let's say, with with Churchill and FDR was so that they would say, you know, Great Britain couldn't take all these prisoners and clothe them and feed them and take care of them. So America had to take some over. And in America we had a labor shortage because many of the young men were drafted and were over there, so we needed workers here. And so there was this agreement, and the numbers differ a little bit. I find anywhere from 425,000 German prisoners of war coming to America to down to 370. I'm not quite sure how the calculation was, but we had all around about 400,000 German prisoners in the United States, in 46 states. So they were all over, not just in a few states. 46 states we had them. And as I said, farm labor shortage was there. And I have some notes here. And by the way, if you have any questions, interrupt me, because I will forget it, or you might forget it by the end when we are done with that. We know that German prisoners came. There were about 12,000 in Nebraska, and they were in different camps. And the question was always, how can we use these prisoners? And we know that the farms needed prisoners. And so after a long discussion in Washington, how to interpret the Geneva Convention, what could a prisoner do? Was he allowed to work here? Was he allowed not to work? They figured it out that, they can work in farm work. And so the question came up to the agricultural department, who asked the extension services in each of the states to determine how many prisoners they wanted to have in order to work on the farms. And they had to figure out how many were needed at that time. And so farm groups had to be formed, who were then the go-between the government and the prisoners. I mean, you needed a farm group who would say, we need 100 prisoners here, and we are paying, and so on and so forth. So the farm groups were formed, and we were. At first, I should show you another one of these This is here, I don't know if you can see it well. Doesn't extend. Anyway, this is Nebraska, the map of Nebraska, and you see different points there. The big point is Atlanta here. This is the big camp in Atlanta, which is by Holdridge, or was by Holdridge. And from that Atlanta camp, there were branch camps, and you can see all over Nebraska, the southern part mostly. But here in this area, it was in Hall County was the one we know at the Dodge School, and the other one was out at the Cornhusker ammunition plant. So we had two in Hall County. There's one in Hastings, one was in Kearney. To my knowledge, the only one, and we will talk about this later, who worked other than in agriculture was the one at the ammunition plant. Most of them were working in agriculture, were working out at the farms. And so the independent rights in April 44, the first group came for us in 1944, and the independent rights there, steps to obtain prisoner of war labor are taken. Association for handling of negotiation with army is organized. So you needed a group who would then do the negotiation with the army. And also, this farm group would then function with writing out the contracts with the War Department. The whole county extension office has a yearbook. Each year they all have a yearbook, and the one from 1944 said that a whole county non-stock co-op labor association was started that year, and the president of this association was Leo Stur. Yeah, so we have, Leo Stur did a lot. But I want to get you through some more photos here, or some pictures. This is the camp in Indianola. There was a special, or just a normal plan for each camp in the United States. It was about the same. And you can see on this plan, you see the barracks. In this one was probably housing 4,000 prisoners. And you can see the different camps. There's chimney coming up. That means they have heating inside. And this is Indianola. It's a painting of Indianola. It's kind of cute. You see, you could drive around. There's a double fence. I hope this is big enough. Let's see if I can make this a little bigger. I'm not very good at that. No? Doesn't get bigger. Sorry. You can see in front is a gate, and here in front are the administrative building and where the American Army was. You see around this camp everywhere guard towers in the back and in front. On the left side you see a water tower. There were also horses you can recognize, and there was also a kind of a hospital type of thing, a water tower and heating facilities. The camp you can see in front a clothesline, which is kind of cute. And way in the back you see 3 soccer fields. So they were entertaining. I'm not quite sure what these buildings which are parallel to the barracks are, but I have a guess. I'm not quite sure about this. It doesn't work. What do I do here? I'm sorry. Fred, I'm in a bind. I don't know. Oh, I want to go to the next picture and it doesn't do it because of that one. How do you close that? Oh, so now we get. So that is a leftover, but is still standing today. You see the rest of the water tower and then heating facilities. And that is not from here, but it is from Iowa, a typical, bunk beds, a typical area. You have a stove there, a chair, and bunk beds where prisoners were, and some pin-up girls on the wall. This is part of the facility too, you need that. So I don't know if that is one of the barracks we saw there, but interesting. By the way, all these paintings I show you are in Holdridge. Holdridge has a little museum. When you come down from the interstate and you go to Holdridge, it's on the right side, and it's a county museum, Phelps County Museum. And they have a whole area just for the Atlanta camps they had there. And they have a wonderful archive. I found a lot of wonderful information, including these things here. So now it's Leo Stur. Let's see if I can do that. I don't know. I'm not good. He's a little small there, but that is a picture of Leo Stur. And as I said, he was in charge of the labor organization. He got in touch with Atlanta, the camp in Atlanta, and he asked, what were the conditions and the requirements in order to get prisoners here for the farms. And so he asked for 100 prisoners. It was safe housing had to be provided for these little branch camps, and they, in 20th of July, in July 1944, 20 German prisoners arrived here and started to renovate the Old Dutch School. The Old Dutch School was in terrible shape. It needed water, and plumbing was not working. It needed glass, many windows once broken down. That thing was supposed to be erased or rented out, so they fixed that up. The cost of the renovation had to be carried by the farm association. It was not that the army did any of the thing. The farmers, Leo Stur and his group, had to pay for the renovation. And the cost for the renovation was just for the material was $2,200 at the time. I found that out. And but additional to this, a lot of volunteer work, and of course the labor from the prisoners. So a critical item was also, how do you pay? Because if you're a farmer and you hire an American worker, you pay $1 a day at those days. So you have to figure out, if you get German prisoners and you don't pay anything, the farmer has an advantage of hiring German prisoners. So you had to figure this out. And they paid, for the prisoners, they paid $1 a day, and this money went at first to the government, but the prisoner got then coupons, which he could then change for something he needed, like, shaving stuff or whatever he could buy in their little, I'm sorry. This is the Old Dutch School. You might recognize the fence around it. There's a fence around it, and so 80 cents the prisoner got in coupons, as I said, and the rest went to the government in order to keep that program going. In July 1944, 100 prisoners arrived here at the Dutch School, and there were guards who were walking around that school building all the time, it was said. It was a high wire fence, as you can see. Nobody could get over that one. And we also want to mention that it was 44, and when the summer was over, they were sent back to Atlanta because the school had no heating facilities. They couldn't stay here. And the harvest was over. So we had also prisoners in the summer of 45. I was lucky. I got to correspond with a former prisoner who was here at Dutch School, and he was in Germany when I caught him. And he was working, he could type, and he could speak some English. And so he was working as a clerk. He never went out to the farm, but he had to keep track of it. How many prisoners get every day from to what place? What farmer would take how many? 5 here, 10 there, and so on. And I asked him one day to write to me about the daily life behind the fence, how they started the morning. And he said, on the beginning, the Americans were their guards, of course, and in the beginning the control was very strict because they all thought that the prisoners were Nazis. And one must think about, at the time, every newspaper in America would call a German soldier a Nazi. It was just a common way to do it. But Germans make a difference. Nazi are people who are member of the Nazi party, which were at the most time 8% of the population. So calling a German Nazi was not calling a soldier who was drafted and was not, volunteering for this garbage. I call it garbage. War for me is something, I don't know. So he writes to me in the morning after roll call. They would have a breakfast, and the breakfast was some bread and some jam and some coffee, which was not real coffee. It was some roasted, I think, wheat or whatever we had in Germany also roasted wheat at the time. And then he said, we took some sandwiches to work, or they took some sandwiches to work, and in the evening they got a warm meal, which was prepared by the prisoners. And he pointed out, he was one who was here in 1945, he pointed out after the Japanese surrendered, they got an awful lot of herring and sauerkraut. I don't know why. No idea why. He said in the morning the prisoners would arrive at the gate with their trucks, and then they would pick up the number of prisoners they asked for and paid for, and then they would go to work. And for security reasons, they always, on the beginning, always a guard accompanied the prisoners to work, because he had to watch that they don't run away. The rules did not allow any type of fraternization. The rules were very strict on this one, but there were guidelines for the farmers and for everybody else. And it says, talking with the prisoners or attempting in any way to fraternize with them has been made a felony by action of the federal government and is punishable by confinement in a penitentiary. Now, this is it. This is a family here, a farm family here north of us, and you cannot see the difference between a prisoner and a farmer. I would say that the ones in the overalls, the jeans overalls, are probably the farmers, because prisoners did not have access to that. But you can see on the left side, I think most of them are prisoners at that time. This just was not the case. We had this wonderful situation here also. There was no language barrier, because many of the farmers still could speak German. And so when, you know that too, when prisoners came out there, they could communicate, but the American guard very often couldn't speak German at all, so he was in a disadvantage. And you see, this is a very touching picture, in my opinion. This one here is another one. A young man became 21 years of age. You see his PW on his knees there. He is a prisoner. And the farm wife made a birthday cake for him. So it's a... there was, over the time, there was some kind of friendship very often developed between the farmers and the prisoners. And that's the way when I found some letters, I could write back to Germany and see if somebody was still alive, and that's how I got in touch with some of them. So it was very nice. What did the prisoners do at the Dutch school? And Sunday they had church service. He writes to me that from the Catholic Church, the bishop could speak German, and he would come to the camp and would perform, would have a service. Also from the Lutheran Church, somebody came, and he said he remembers somehow the Baptist Church, somebody came from there too. They had some kind of entertainment. They played soccer. They would sing a lot. They got musical instruments from the YMCA if they needed it. And they had even built up some kind of a stage in one of the big, huge bedroom halls. And the last time they were here, they invited Leo Stur and some other people, farmers, to come and watch them, and they were performing some kind of things on the stage. I'm not sure what, but these were the coupons you can see which were used. This is Atlanta. It says prisoner of war camp exchange. And this one has a $sign, the first one. There were different denominations. And one of the prisoners I wrote to, he said he saved up many of these, and he finally bought himself a cheap wristwatch because he wanted so badly to have a watch, and so he still had it. Here is something which I found in the archive in Holdridge. It's probably the only view we will ever have. One of the prisoners painted from one of the windows at the Dutch school over to the courthouse. He made that watercolor. Kind of nice. And that is, the original is in Holdridge in the archives there. So in after the harvest was over, they went back to the main camp. In March 45, this is March now before the next season starts, the Wood River Sunbeam reported that in the end of last year's season, more than 320 tons of sugar beets had been harvested by German POWs from the Dutch school. They had brought in 34,000 sacks of potatoes and husked more than 44,000 bushels of corn. So you can see it was necessary that these people came here and helped with the harvest. There was no other way of doing it. Would have been a disaster. In my mind, there is no question that this Hall County labor program, which contracted German prisoners for farm work, had been a good success, and people looked forward to 45. The Wood River Sunbeam also said, the farmers should make plans now for the farming season. And you would think that after May 8th, the end of the war in Germany, that prisoners would be sent home. But there was an agreement between Churchill and Truman at that time that I think Churchill wasn't there anymore. He was voted down. Anyway, between Great Britain and Germany and Truman, that they would delay the repatriation in order to cover the harvest here, the harvest season here. So we had prisoners again here in 45 coming to Dutch school and helping with the farm work. The other thing, when they were shipped off to Atlanta back home, they thought they would go home. They were shipped on a ship going over to Europe, and what happened there is there was a contract with Russia and with England and with France to have a forced labor program. German civilians, but mostly German prisoners, were not sent home right away. They were sent to Great Britain or to France, and the ones in Russia, many prisoners in Russia. My uncle died in a Russian prison camp, so I heard a lot about Russian prison camps. They were kept there. I think Stalin asked for 4 million German who would supply forced labor in Russia, and I think many of them were there. And they were not considered prisoners, they were considered enemies still, to help out. So that's so much on the forced labor program, which is another chapter one should one day research, but people in Germany know more about it than I do probably. The other information we have about is Camp Cornhusker, which has a nice name because everybody associates it with farming, but it wasn't, and it was probably very unique. In July 1944, the Independent published an article with the headline, "Labor Needs at Ordnance Plant Acute. 500 additional workers are needed as soon as possible." Let me go here one more. There is something you can read. It says, "Army and Navy wants action. Home front needs workers to load bombs and shells. Destination for Tokyo or Berlin." The bombs. "Show your colors and get the munitions to the boss over there, to the boys over there. Males and females can do the work. Good pay." The pay was really good over there. You got, I think, also 80 cents. And interesting for women, when the majority at the ammunition plant were women, they got paid the same way as men. If you would work here downtown in a store or so, you would get 30 cents. But they got, a buck or something. And then there was given here hiring at the Ordnance Corporation and so on. The quota for the production of bombs, which had been set by the War Department, had been increased significantly again because we came to the end of the war, but we kind of intensified the wars with Japan. And the Independent would report that General Eisenhower even had sent officers back to America, in his quotation here, to see what could be done to speed up production of bombs and shells. So 5 soldiers who had been in Germany on the front arrived here at the ammunition plant, and in order to accommodate the demand for the expansion of the bomb production, it became certain that they had to build more facilities here. And the ordnance plant pointed out a brand new super bomb line, as the manager called it, would be built. So in August, the headline of the ordnance plant, they had a little newsletter which was called the Co-Planter. By the way, one of the nicest jewels you have here is that little museum up in Cairo. The archive is really good. They have a lot of material from the ammunition plant up there, and they have the full set of these little copies of this little newspaper, which is called the Co-Planter. It was a bi-weekly paper and was distributed free of charge to everybody who worked out there. So I was lucky they have this out there. And they pointed out in this the new loading line to be built at Cornhusker Ordnance Plant will be a $3 million project to be ready for operation 4 months from start. So they started in October. The new production line will be of most modern design and equipped to operate for loading heavy caliber shells or bombs. The construction would be carried out by a private construction company. And they had also subcontractors, so you had a lot of different people. It kind of, it's a private company, it's not the army, but the army engineer who was in charge to design and build this new line there could not find labor. There were, we had the airport here, we had the farm workers here, and then the ammunition plant itself needed a lot of workers. So finding a whole bunch of 200, 300 workers to build that new construction line was very, very difficult. We also, if you remember, had the usual work here. We had the sugar beet plant and other things here in town. So he tried to get people to work there, and he failed. So we had to think about prisoner of war labor. So at the end of October in 1944, the Independent gets a press release from Atlanta, from the prison camp over there. It read that a large number of German prisoners would be transferred to a new branch camp at the Cornhusker Army ammunition plant, including a number of American soldiers as their guards. And soon these prisoners arrived. So I want to point out that after WWII Day, German POWs could work in war-related factories, but this is October, so we are still quite a few months away from WWII Day in 1945. I found out, looking through all this, some sources where prisoners, for example, were repairing army uniforms or were sewing uniforms and repairing them. I found out that in Maryland, I think it was, they were repairing army trucks. So you can figure out, is that now war-related or not? But I don't know if this was done, before the war ended. I still think that our situation here in Grand Island was unique. And so a group of German POWs from Atlanta came here in the end of October up to the Cornhusker ammunition plant. It is amazing how little is known about this, really, among the people who worked here. My records show that 376 POWs came out to the Cornhusker ammunition plant. And that's probably 4 times as much as the one who worked at the Dutch camp, at the Dutch school camp. Of this, 298 were labor related to the construction, and the rest of them were trying to maintain the camp. You had cooks who had to cook for the prisoners, and you had to clean and make the laundry and all that one. The label was always that these POWs were under private contract. It was never any connection with the army there. But, we don't know. it somehow feels to me that it somehow covers up the association with the military when you say a private contractor. The camp was a good a mile away from the rest of the plant, or several miles away. Let's see, we have a, see, here is the independent article, prisoners to be used on project in area of the COP. This is the only article ever appeared in the independent, to my knowledge. I may have overlooked some, but that's the one. And it goes on and explains, Here is, in general, the map of the ammunition plant out there. And to the right, you have the first and the second and the third bomb line, where they were filling shells. And then the fourth one is the one on the way on the left side, which is much bigger and was much more modern. As I said, the camp was good a mile away from the rest of the plant. The public was assured that the prisoners would under adequate military guard at all times and will be housed in a fenced-in area equipped with night illumination and sentry stations. The prison camp was just 100 yards or a few hundred yards west of the new construction site. It should be mentioned that I don't think that any American worker who worked at the ammunition plant had any knowledge that there were German prisoners. Maybe some of you do. I don't know. I have looked through the papers. I have looked through all kinds of things. So this is interesting. I mean, you had some prisoners working there, and we don't know. They're probably the American workers there didn't realize that. The Germans now were building bomb load line number 4, and it was, as they pointed out, the technical design, the newest in technical design, and much larger than any of the other 3 lines. The Army press release at that time was adamant about that it was strictly under the Geneva Convention. These people were construction workers and nothing else. The commanding officer at the POW camp in Atlanta explained the Geneva Convention, and they were written, as you may know, I'm not so good at this, but 1929 they were written after World War I. So it was pointed out that you could let prisoners work in your country if you had prisoners, but you could not have them in any war-related work, doing any war-related work. There is a book at the public library which is written by Glenn Thompson, and I may have mentioned it before. It's called Prisoners on the Plains, and it's really a very good book. Some of the illustrations I got out of his book here, and his research is in Holdridge in that level. He points out that the POWs here in Camp Cornhusker probably did a lot more than shucking corn. At one time, the Red Cross was supposed to inspect the International Red Cross came to all kinds of prison camps all over, and they came. We don't know if they came. We have a very short report, and I wonder if they even came. I can read you the report, and that was all. Prisoners on, the prisoners do construction work in a military depot, 8 hours a day, and all are paid 80 cents a day. Our general impression is good, the moral is good. That was all. So if you send somebody here, I'm sure he has more to say than just these 3-4 sentences. The Germans there, the prisoners, had really no idea what they were doing on the beginning. And there was one of the prisoners in 1992 was interviewed who had been stationed there. And he pointed out, or he mentioned that after a while the prisoners were realizing what they were doing. And they wanted to go on a strike. And there was a Catholic priest, it could have been the bishop, I don't know who spoke German there as well, who went and talked to them and said, you have good food here, it's relatively quiet, the war is almost over, forget it. And so they were persuaded. I want to mention that when POWs went on strike, they were treated very severely. Water and bread for 2 weeks was in general the idea. So, that prison camp existed for 4 months and was closed on February 5th. Let me see what I got here. I have more. There is more an overview. You can see how far everything is. Here's Highway 30 going south and Highway 2 going north. It's still there today. I mean, you can see some of these items there. This is the contract. This is the report, the worker report on the end, which pointed out how many prisoners were there. I made a copy of the last page. It points out how many prisoners were there and what work they were doing and when this camp was closed. And the camp was closed on February 5th, 1945. And all these prisoners returned to Atlanta. The last report pointed out that they were under private contract, so there is no connection to the army with that. The co-planter on March 16, 1945, this is now the newspaper for the people who work there, points out on the headline, largest ammunition production unit in the United States is ready to begin loading operation at the Cornhusker ammunition plant. So the production there had started in March. And you probably all know on May 26 was a big accident, a big explosion, and 9 people were killed there, unfortunately. So that's how much I know about Cornhusker camp. I have here one more slide. That is the is the site of loading line number 4. How it is today. I went there out last spring and took that photo. All around us farmland today. It's farmed. You can see irrigation in the back. But this is still the rubble from that loading line, number 4. And that the war ends. That is when Japan accepts the early terms. So I accept questions if you have any. Yes?
To your knowledge, are there any of the German prisoners of war in back and in your family?
A few, very few. It was very difficult to do that because, you were still an enemy for quite a few times. You had to have a sponsor here. So, and people after the war were not that rich either. It was difficult to do. I mean, there's always the idea, yes, they all came back. There was a lot of letter exchange. And a museum in Berlin is collecting these letters now. They have an archive. I have brought a few there, and they want to collect letters from German prisoners who have been in other countries. All the letters from my uncle who lived in, or his friends who were in a Russian prison camp, I gave all to them because, what should I do with them over long term? Getting too old for that. Yes? Yes?
I just wanted to add to what you said about maybe being a little bit outside the lines according to the Geneva Convention. I read Thompson's book.
Yes.
One of the prisoners in there, I believe he'd written home. And the letter that he'd received before, they asked, what did you do? And he said, well, I worked for an eraser
Yes.
company because he was trying to get it through
Yes.
the censors to get it home. And then he was questioned, what do you mean an eraser company? Well, I built the buildings that built the bombs that erased German cities.
The German word, the German word for eraser is also radier, which means ausradieren, which means also to destroy or to get rid of it. So
Well,
it
actually, it was kind of a result of that got
eraser
that
company.
was probably pushing
I should have mentioned that, but that's a wonderful story. I like that.
And then the other part I want to mention, the Indianola camp that you put up there, Indianola was actually a special camp in the sense that it was for not necessarily a hardcore Nazi, but let's call them a mild form of Nazi.
Yeah.
And that was a constant problem they had in Atlanta, sorting the Nazis, the art Nazis from
Yeah. What you got
population that
when
might run the
yeah
camp.
when you had prisoners coming here from 1943, 44, they came from Africa or from Italy, and they had many Nazis, real Nazis among them, and they still believed on the great victory of the German Reich and whatever. And the people who came, who were captured in 44, 45, who were captured in Germany, they knew the end was there. And so there was a big difference. And some of the, you may have read enough material about this, some of the camps in other states really had big trouble. I mean, there were killings among each other, the Nazis.
That was a challenge to
Yeah.
who those people were causing the trouble. And
Yeah.
really hardcore.
Yeah.
I believe it was Alva, Oklahoma, and that was prison.
Yeah, there is a wonderful.
That was just crazy. You didn't work, you didn't do anything.
You don't, yeah.
Indianola was a milder form of
Yeah,
Nazi,
yeah.
but caused enough trouble to.
Well, if you had trouble, they would, oh, I'm sorry, they would separate them very soon if they could. There is a marvelous movie out with Walter Matthau about a prison camp in Colorado where there is a murder from one of these Nazis and somebody else is accused and he has to defend this guy. And his own son is dying on the front in Germany, but he is a lawyer in town and they hire him to defend this because they think he's so stupid, he's from the countryside, he will, not have the right, but he defends him successfully. It's a wonderful movie. I forgot the title of it. Yes?
Can you share names of some of the local farmers who used the German prisoner of war labor?
I know very well the Quant family, but otherwise I know your family did. Yes. Yeah, that would be nice. Can you hand up who had prisoners of war? Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow. I should talk to all of you.
I recall as a young kid, prisoner of war picnic potatoes.
Yes.
And they would eat dinner in our yard.
Yes.
We would cook potatoes, roast dinner, chickens and things, because they were sent out with 2 slices of bread.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No.
Their entertainment after dinner was laughing. And what were they laughing about? Somebody would say, Superman! And they'd all laugh, and the guy who was going down, somebody else say, Superman! And then they'd laugh. That was their entertainment.
Yes.
I was speaking with Maxine, who was a Cornelius, and she said that they had German prisoners of war lived on. Both their parents were German speaking, and she remembered that the prisoners of war were very nice people. They treated her, they just enjoyed her. She was a little blonde-haired, blue-eyed young girl, and they had a nickname for her, pet nickname. Her parents had them come into the house in the basement to eat, and they fed them well because they thought, they said they worked hard. Why should they have just this little light lunch that was sent along with them? And she said there was camaraderie, and the parents just kind of defied those orders,
Yeah.
guidelines, because they thought they were ridiculous.
Well, the Quant family, I talked to some members of it a long time ago. They also said, they need, if we feed everybody else who works for us, we feed them too. One should not forget that all the soldiers who came here were sometimes very young. They had left home, they were drafted. They were soldiers like every other soldiers all over the world who had to do it. And I think we were here, Americans were very generous about that. Very nice. Yes.
I think you made reference that there was a guard sent out with the prisoners to the farm for a while. My father had them. I was a sophomore in high school. We only lived on Merritt County line. Took us into school, and then he brought the prisoners out to work, and so we never saw them. But my mother had to teach school that year because the lady that was going to teach didn't have the gas to drive to Seeding Mouse School from her home.
Yeah.
And my grandmother came out to help, and I know they always made a pot of soup and they ate on the wraparound porch. My dad spoke very good German, and so did my grandmother. I have letters from that were sent to Leo Stewart and also to my father from prisoners that hinted broadly they would like to come back.
They would love to.
But what seems to me, it seems to me that Dad said they didn't have a guard with them when they came.
Well, that kind of loosened on the beginning. They did have guards, and then you had here 5 people and there 3 people. The guards were stretched. You couldn't go everywhere. You didn't have enough guards, and so after a while, that's loosened up. Also, the rules were that you could not take anybody into your house. If you had hired a prisoner, you couldn't take him into the house. So somebody tells me they had lunch in the basement. That is,
I know they said they ate on the porch. They didn't go in the house.
Yeah, and then also you could not let them come close to any driving equipment, like a tractor or a car or anything like that. And you only could provide them with water. And for many of the prisoners, as he pointed out to me, the weather was so hard, they're not used to this. And, Germany is air conditioned. Yes.
My father became very good friends with one of these prisoners, and he was a bridge engineer in Germany,
Okay.
East Berlin. And they wrote letters back and forth, and so his son and I wrote letters back and forth, and I got all these letters.
Oh, neat.
And the letters stopped coming in about 1949 or 50 when the Berlin Wall went up. And so we just figured that was the end.
Yeah.
But I had reunited with this friend of mine here a few years ago. And in all of his letters, he wanted to come to USK better today than tomorrow.
Yeah.
He became a college professor in East Berlin, and he's retired now.
Sure.
And so, but he would write in these letters where mother sold a piece of furniture to buy food and stuff while his dad was over here.
Yeah.
But these war prisoners were family men. That's the reason they were prisoners, the way I understood it as a little kid, because he would play with my little brother and sister, but they were family people.
Well, most of them were drafted. I know my father, for example, was drafted in World War I. He was born in 1896, and then he died suddenly in 1942. But a few days or a few weeks, I don't know exactly anymore, I haven't done, we got a draft notice. So my father was way beyond the age of being drafted, but they drafted anybody. And as you see pictures from the end of the war, you see 15, 16-year-old little boys being drafted. It's terrible.
Well, I called this man about, it would be 5 o'clock our time, about midnight his, and I got his phone number. And he said, Hamlet Friday. And I said, I'm Dwayne Fraser. Oh, I know Dwayne Frazier. He's from Kearney, Nebraska.
Oh.
Because that was his dad's address.
Yeah, okay.
And I said, I have all your letters. And he says, at midnight, I sent you some pictures too. I said, I still got those. So I sent those back to you too.
It's amazing. Yes?
I was just going to speak, my father worked for a grain company here in Ireland, and he picked up prisoners from God's school to help them with grain.
Yes,
Back then, they didn't have the elevators like they did, so
sure.
a lot of skip jobs, but he sprayed the guys, and he got along real good with them,
Yeah,
and they were really good workers.
yeah.
I remember I was probably 10, 11 years old, and I used to go up by God's school, and you could talk to them prisoners as a child through the fence.
Did they let you? The guards, did they let you talk?
Well,
Well, this prisoner I owed Forsberg, he pointed out that once in a while somebody would throw a pack of cigarettes over the fence for them.
yeah.
And people would come by, they could speak German. It was tempting to go over there and speak, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, they were young people. Yes?
I think we need to remember that these German farmers and other German-speaking people in the area, some of them had relatives over in Germany.
Yes.
And I think connecting with the German prisoners of war here was a way that they were also thinking and connecting of their relatives
Yeah.
who were back in Germany.
Yes?
What happened to, I take it most of these were male prisoner of wars?
Yes.
Their families, what happened to their families back in Germany, or did they have any, were they too young to have any?
Well, they were allowed to write once. The guy who was I'm talking to had only once written to his family. He knew where they were living. It depends where you lived in Germany. You know, some were bombed out, some were not alive anymore. But many of them found home again. I know from this guy that 5 other prisoners found their family okay. Some things are miracles. I tell you, we were evacuated. My mother was there with 3 little kids in 1940. Let's see, 44. We wound up in a little village, which was Poland, because my mother was a teacher, and they wanted all these Polish kids to learn German, because that was occupied in '39. And so when the war was over, and we wanted to go back to see my grandparents in Berlin, and we had no other place to go. We had not heard from them for 6, 7 months from Christmas on, 8 months we hadn't heard from them. No idea if they survived. And I remember when I walked, I was a little kid then, I was 8 when the war was over. And we walked around the street corner, and my mother said, "You run away and see if the house is still standing." And the house was standing, and everybody was so relieved. You know, we hadn't seen them for so. This happened a lot because as a prisoner you were somewhere and had no idea if your family was still alive. Some of them, yes. It depends where you live. You know, big cities were bombed heavily. Interesting was for me, my mother had visited me here in Grand Island a few times, and I said, "Hey, should we go out there? I want to show you the ammunition plant." She didn't want to hear anything about that. She had been in Berlin, too many bombing raids. Yes, please.
Yes, did anybody, when they were in prison camps here in Grand Island especially, but even like down in Orleans, did anybody die? And if they did, where did they return them at?
No, nobody died here as far as I know. But what happened is one truck, when they in the evening brought back the prisoners, one of the trucks turned over or something, or some prisoner flew out of the truck. You know, those days we didn't have seatbelts and all that stuff. We were just standing in the truck until you came home. And he was badly injured. And they transported him right back to Indianola to that hospital they had there for him. That's the only accident I know of. You know, they were young and relatively healthy people. No, I had never heard about that. Yes?
Did he attempt to escape?
I think once was an attempt here in Grand Island with two guys, and they thought they could get through some of it. In an hour or so they were brought back. They didn't know where to go. I mean, you were in the middle of nowhere here, you know.
They didn't realize how big the nowhere was.
Yes, yeah. Nobody realized that really. I mean, I didn't realize it when I came to America. I had no idea how big that is. My mother always said it was here, when she visited me here, she said Nebraska, the United States is unnecessarily large.
Unnecessary.
Yeah.
Did they come by train? Did they come on the train?
Yeah, they came by train to these different camps. They came over by ship, and there are photos of, you know, loaded up with all these prisoners, tied, very tight. They were allowed coming out for fresh air. Then they were arriving this guy he arrived in Boston, I don't know why Boston, but he arrived there. And they were then registered, of course, lots of paperwork and all that stuff. And he said he was on a higher rank, and there is some kind of regulation where certain, I think, officers don't have to work or something like that. I have to really, I understand this, I don't understand. But his book, where he was registered as on a higher rank in the German army, was taken away, and he was told when he goes back to Germany, he gets it back. And he said, he was suspicious, and he said, probably they need me for working, but we would have worked anyway because it's boring just sitting in a camp all the time. So they were happy to get out and do farm work here.
That beer. Don't forget beer.
Beer.
They motivated the German prisoners with beer. Because you paid 80 cents a day, and beer cost 10 cents in the canteen.
Okay.
If you were an officer,
Okay.
you refused to work, you didn't have any money, you
Yeah.
couldn't buy any beer.
I have no idea if it,
Just a second, I want a beer. Well, if you want beer, you gotta have canteen script. Well,
Yeah.
canteen script, you gotta work.
yeah, of course.
So it would
Yeah.
actually be enough to drink 8 beers a day.
No, yeah, of course, if you could. I don't know if they had beer here in Grand Island.
Not in Grand Island, in Atlanta.
And the big ones,
They
yeah.
actually learned that from a camp down south. That
Yeah.
The officers refused to work and they needed all.
Yeah,
And that's how they did it.
okay.
How do you motivate a German? With beer.
Beer. I don't blame them, really. That's for me too. I like beer when it's hot and good glass of beer. Anything else? Yes.
How familiar with the Hastings area as compared to Grand Island?
Well, today that article in the paper was revealing. I don't know anything about it. I have tried to call this guy who wrote this book about the ammunition, the ammunition thing there, and I should know more about it. I know there was a prison camp there, And I don't know if they work, how they work, maybe they work just in agriculture, I don't know. Was a prison camp in Hebron, I want to go, this is in Kansas, I think. I mean, there are everywhere now markers, but the one in Atlanta was my first one I went to. There was one out at Scottsbluff. Let's see. No, Fort Robinson, that was big. That was really, there were thousands of them. And there's also an archive. They had, interesting was for me, when you had a huge group like the one in Scottsbluff, they had their own camp newsletter in German. It was printed on this paper. You remember the old purple thing you had to wind up and carvy things? Mimeograph, right. And that thing was on a mimeograph, so the prisoners got programs, you can see what they did and how they, but there was always this re-education as a first thing to figure out, how do we instill democracy to these people? What do we do? And this is another big story. I don't know, we didn't have this here in Home County, but I'm sure in Atlanta. There were newsletters who were always positive for American democracy. Here in Grand Island, the prisoners could not have newspapers, they could not have one, but some of the guards who obviously read the papers here, maybe even the Grand Island Independent, would once in a while give the prisoners some newspapers, and these people were eager to figure out what was going on in Europe and what was going on in Germany. There was somebody else, yes?
Well, my man tells me that, or had told me that they have them kicking corn.
Yes.
And he says that the prisoners were real horse lovers. And when they get through in the evening after they shoot their last load off, they take the wagons out on the alfalfa field and race.
Oh my gosh.
And the old field wheel wagons and the big high magboard, Dad said it got darn old fast enough to wagon.
One should maybe collect all these stories which were against the rules and regulations what prisoners supposed to do. This is a neat story. Yes?
I've heard Walter Miller from Hastings talk before.
Okay.
And if anyone ever gets a chance to hear him, you should go hear him. He's extremely interesting and knows a lot about what went on in town and at the plant itself.
Yeah.
Would you contact me later? Perhaps we can get him for a voice speaker.
That would be great.
I don't have any more
There's a
phone number than anybody else does.
Well, the correct spelling of Miller would help you.
There is a phone number. I can get it.
Good.
I want to get in touch with him too. Okay.
I brought a notebook over here on the second table. My husband corresponded with Hubert Heinrich for many years in the 40s, and finally we got a letter etched in black, and he had died. So if anybody wants to look at the cards and the pictures that Hubert Heinrich sent to my husband, he corresponded with him many times because my husband knew German before he knew English.
Yeah, and they employed German prisoners.
Yes,
Yeah.
they did.
Yeah.
2 of them worked out at the South Farm, but that was before my time.
Yeah.
But I have put it in a notebook and brought it.
It's really interesting. I looked through the notebook once, so you have a chance to look at it. My gosh, I'm so pleased and so flattered that you all came.
We are glad you came. Do you have this written in any book form or anything?
No. Once in a while I publish something in the Independent, they publish it for me, and I had this on I don't know if I brought a few, the Independent gave me a whole bunch of these things I wrote about at Copeland as a newsletter.
On the back table over there,
Yeah.
Llewellyn Sachs's things.
The next thing in the Silver Salute, that's where Pete is so nice, he does it. There will be an article, I think this month, about, you remember after Pearl Harbor, there was this anti-Japanese sentiment, but many of the Japanese people who were here in America were American citizens. And the idea was also because of the labor shortage that we should get some of the Japanese from these detention camps, which were in the west from here, over here to work on the farms. And that went completely next. I mean, they didn't want anything to do, so they wrote a little article and the silver salute on this one. She was